Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, FBP family, to this month's Rewind Show. And I'm Chantal Broderick. No, I'm not. I'm actually filling in for Chantal today. And I get the immense opportunity in the Rewind Show today to talk to the Interim President and CEO of IHRSA, Brent Darden. Good morning, or good evening, I should say to you, Mr. Darden.
Hey, JT, thanks for having me, sir. It's great to be on again.
Look, for anyone that has lived under a rock or behind the COVID curtain for the last 12 months, Brent took on the role of Interim President and CEO of IHRSA. I think it was nearly 9 months ago. Is that right, Brent?
Yeah, exactly. Right at 9 months.
And as a result, he still continued to be as a REX chair, and REX are obviously one of our partners at the Fitness Business Podcast. Now, I'm going to start after this introduction, Brent. I've got to ask you the toughest question. What is harder, being interim president and CEO of IHRSA and reimagining that entire organization, or remaining a loyal Dallas Cowboys fan?
Remaining Dallas Cowboy fan, I think. I don't know, that's close.
There's only you and me left as Dallas Cowboys fans.
Yeah. Yeah, and a few other people that just, won't give it up. Yeah. That's bad.
So we move on from that.
Yes, let's please do.
Mate, look, you are a great guy. The industry love you, and I know the industry will be eternally grateful, and the legacy that you will leave after this last 9 months will be ongoing. We had you on the show, I think it was show 333, where we talked about how to pivot your business in 2021. And we almost looked at IHRSA as a case study in that interview. So I guess, let me start with a simple question. And that is, as businesses across the US reopen or around the world have been open for a while, they get into the hustle and bustle of kind of back into daily operations. What are your tips as our resident expert today to ensure that all the ideas that you reimagined become baked into that business, become part of the DNA of the business?
Well, thanks for the kind words, first of all. And I don't know that I'm an expert, but I do have some battle scars. So maybe some people can learn from my battle scars going through the process. I wish there was some great secret I could say that I learned, JT, after having so many years in the industry, but it really comes back to a lot of things that most of your audience will know. So I jotted down just a few things in my mind that I thought I would share. One is that you have to go through sort of the discovery process first and establish what your current reality is, just sort of where you are, and be, brutally honest with yourself based on the feedback you're getting from your customers and the people that you're serving. All right. And even your colleagues, perhaps, that can give you feedback, people that are on your roundtable that can maybe give you some unfiltered feedback. So that's number one, establishing sort of where you are. And what I found was even the most loyal IHRSA members, followers that are also friends of mine from decades will give you constructive feedback. That's a given. And then even your harshest critics, on the other hand, who have railed against IHRSA for whatever reason, there's also a thread of helpful feedback from them, something that they appreciate about the association. So you've got to take all of that together and then sort of help that crystallize what you think your value proposition and where your customer value is, where your member experience really is with people, and then begin to build on that. So that's one thing I would say that was the first step.
Tell me, I love the phrase brutally honest. I think that is one of the best phrases that we can use in business to get better. How do you, from your experience, how do you in a business get brutally honest in your own business? Because often our ego, I think, stands in the way of really diving into the brutal honesty.
Yeah, I think that's right, JT. And I think I had a blessing in disguise, if you want to call it that, because, I stepped in as interim CEO. One day I was on the outside looking in, and the next day I was on the inside looking out. And it really gave me a perspective that is unique for most people, so that I knew and had heard some of the unfiltered feedback about IHRSA before I even took the role, never knowing I was going to be in the role, right? So it was, water cooler conversation or whatever it might be. They gave me a leg up. And then I think because it was so fresh for people, they were more willing to speak with me, because I had been, again, on the outside and one of them, if you will, one of the members of the association, although the people knew I had obviously served with IHRSA in the past. But I think you're right. I think first you do still have to set your ego aside and your defensive reaction when people are giving feedback. And it didn't take long, of course. I'm one of those people that rides for the brand. I ride for Rex and I ride for IHRSA. And now, of course, I talk about we, and that means IHRSA right now. And so the same thing applies. And I think you just have to be realistic and separate it a little bit, if you can, from you as an individual, to look at your business in a rational and professional and mature way. And one thing I would say to that, JT, and I know you and I have both seen this on our roundtables, it seems like it can go two ways. The more veteran you become and the more successful you become in your business, you go either to the way that you're welcoming feedback, you're seeking feedback, you're confident enough in who you are, what you've done, the success you've achieved, that you're open to that and confident still. Or you can go the other way, where you think you have all the answers and you're the smartest one in the room, no matter what room you go in. Those people exist on your roundtables as well. And so I hope I stayed on the side of, man, I got a lot to learn. Tell me the feedback and let me try and help IHRSA improve.
Tell me, whether it was you being at the helm of IHRSA or even back when you had Telos, your own health club, when members came in and gave you feedback on whether it was a change in policy, and at the moment it could be masks or not masks, it could be physical distancing in the club, it could be anything, but they came in and gave you feedback. For them, it was honest. For you, you might have been thinking, you've been smoking something wacky before you've come in to give me this feedback. How did you take that, or even now, how do you take that where it's feedback, but it's not, you don't take it personally?
Yeah, I think, again, that's a mindset that I think you have to go into it with, where you're open and you sort of train yourself to think this is an opportunity to learn and try and understand where that other person's coming from. As I've said, again, going back earlier about the member experience or the customer experience, whatever industry you're in, there's that contingent of customers that are just ugly. And they tend to be ugly when they're talking to you, and you follow them down the street and they're ugly at the restaurant and they're ugly at the grocery store and the gas station. That's who they are. That's not who you are.
Yeah.
And so embracing that concept, and then again, trying to understand where they're coming from, trying to take their comments seriously. And if you can at all, act upon them or explain why you're not. That to me is, just really basic customer experience stuff. And there's no secret there.
And I've heard you say a number of times in your tenure now, and I'm assuming you would have done this also when you're at the club, how many times you just picked up the phone and had conversations with people? You didn't hide from that, have you?
No, I have a very real world example. We had our National Health and Fitness Alliance Council meeting just a few weeks ago, our initial one, and it was a mess because we purposefully recruited and put people on that council that we knew thought differently than we did. They didn't think IHRSA was doing what all it needed to do from a public policy standpoint. They had really big ideas, really different ideas, sort of controversial in nature, and that came out. in the meeting collectively. And I thought, how can I move this forward in a really productive way? So I set individual meetings with every council member between that meeting and the one upcoming, so that I could hear them out. Because in a group setting, you don't have time for everyone to share their thoughts, either because you just don't have enough time, or it's not appropriate, or there's too many people wanting to talk, or the loud ones are talking and the more reserved ones are not. By getting them one-on-one and giving them the platform where they didn't feel like they were fighting for attention or to get their views heard, I've used that over the years, and it, I mean, no credit, it's no secret, but man, did it work.
You're right. It's no secret to that, but that's courageous. Like, I kind of see these days a lot of owners, a lot of club managers hiding behind email or text message, whereas you've actually got, this is the lesson I think for us that I'm hearing, is the power of communication, whether it's a phone call or it's a Zoom meeting like this, that has impact, and almost makes you vulnerable to that feedback, but strengthens that relationship. Would that be right?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And it went both ways, JT. Seriously, I was challenged, frustrated, because I thought some of their comments were uninformed about IHRSA. You're making comments and you don't really, that's not true what you're saying. The facts are just off. Your idea may be fine, but how you're voicing it shows a lack of understanding. So part of it was me helping them see and understand the realities of what's there. And then conversely, the same was true for me. All I got was their sound bites in those meetings, which didn't play very well. But then when I had a chance to really, so tell me why you think that. What's behind this? What's driving these comments? Without exception, really. I mean, there's a couple that are still pretty outlandish, but most of them on balance were, reasonable. And that's what I really think that's it. It does, the last thing I needed was just to add 10 more Zoom meetings on my time these days, but that's what it took. And having seen the results, I'd do it again in a heartbeat. So I would encourage people to do that. Pick up the phone, have a conversation. We've said this, you and I both know this, JT, if something's going not quite the way you want, or it seems tension, or there's stress, or there's confrontation, don't do it in an email or a text, because there's no tone. It's hard to interpret. Pick up the phone and talk to somebody, or go to them in person.
That takes courage. Now, one thing I liked about what you just said, then you used the word sound bites. As a leader, how do you, again, I guess this is your mindset, and I'm trying to dive into the Brent Darden mind right now.
Yes, you're going way off cue here, JT.
I know, I'm asking you questions without notice, but often in business, we get caught up on that sound bite, that one sentence or that one phrase that somebody might say at the end of a group fitness class, or a client says on their way out after a personal training session, or a staff member says to us. How do we as leaders not get hung up on that soundbite?
Yeah, I don't know that I have the best answer there. I just think you've got to, as we already said, try not to take it personally. And what's the old saying from Stephen Covey? Seek first to understand, not to be understood.
Nice.
Yeah. And I try to remind myself of that before I judge them too harshly, or write off their comments as just, oh man, that's just who they are, or has no basis. Trying to understand where that's coming from, and maybe dig a little deeper, give them the benefit of the doubt, is what I would say.
I love that. That's great advice. Okay. Now, I've been really privy over the last 9 months to see up close some of the reimagined work that the team have done at IHRSA. Really phenomenal, some of the things, and we might even cover them after this question if you like. But a key phrase that I guess that we hear when discussing business pivoting or indeed reimagining is that we've got to get team buy-in. We'll get traction when the team believe in what we're doing. And without that team buying into the new direction or ideas, services, products, strategies, etc., then they're probably going to fail as an idea. If we use IHRSA as a case study, how did you get team buy-in initially? And then how do you maintain that team buy-in over that 12-month period or 9-month period?
I think, I've sort of repeated this mantra of these three things that I always try to do when I'm thinking about team buy-in and launching new initiatives and the reimagination. And that is, number one is make sure people are informed. So inform them so they know what's happening and why it's happening, right? We've heard that for decades from the pundits, you got to have the why, but inform them. Second to me was invite them. Invite them to be part of it, the solution or the process or the program or the initiative, whatever it is, and then involve them as it continues on. Those three steps to me: inform, invite, and involve. I've not picked that from anywhere. That's just something I kind of connected together. But, you're a great example, JT. I mean, you're my friend and a colleague as well, and an industry leader, but I informed you of the GHFA and what was happening. I invited you to be part of it and then to use your skills to help run the group, the short-term goal group, and got you involved. And then you got other people involved. And I've repeated that over and over at IHRSA, not just with staff. And we think about this with staff, but the same process to me, what I used with board members who really were not that involved. They would go to the meetings 3 times a year, but they weren't really, to their own admission, and they wanted to be more involved. I heard that over and over before I started. We don't feel like we're contributing much. How can we get more involved? Now they would never say that again because they're
probably saying, please, not so much involvement.
Yes, not so much involvement. And the headlight teams are another one. Or, one of the things I'm really proud of that I think is going to help IHRSA continue into the future is all the councils. We have not only the IHRSA board of directors, but now we have an industry partners council. We have the Global Health and Fitness Alliance. We have the National Health and Fitness Alliance. We have the Medical Science and Health Advisory Council. And we have, other headlight teams that are still in place. And all of those originated out of informing people of the need and the why, then inviting people to participate and be a part of developing a solution, and then getting them involved once they've agreed to participate. And not only get them involved, but get them involved in ways that maximize their own strengths. And I'll use you as an example again, if you don't mind. We talk about this with our teams, the people that work for us, right? Put them in places where they can use their own gifts and talents. Mm-hmm. And without your maybe acknowledging it, but you're a very gifted moderator, speaker, getting groups together and then pulling people's comments and building consensus. I knew that because I knew you before. And when I invited you to be part of the solution, I asked you to participate in a way that I knew you would be successful. And I really tried to do that with all these headlight teams, of which there were about 15. So, it wasn't just a collection of industry leaders because they were successful in the club business. If you look at each individual headlight team and what they were working on, the people that were on it were passionate about whatever that topic was and had experience that related to what I was hoping they could help us with. And again, there's nothing we don't know, but sometimes we forget that with our own staff. But the same thing applies to volunteerism and any work group.
Brent, I've got a couple of questions, but I'm going to start off by saying there's a book in that, the 3 I's by Brent Darden. I love informed, invite, involve. I've never heard that. That hasn't been in any textbook that I've read. So there's your bestseller that you can write when you retire to the log cabin.
Thank you. I'll try and remember that.
The 3 I's of Brent Darden. That's it. That's the key. I really like the fact that to get that team buy-in, you've identified your team's or the individual's strengths and involve them in that particular area. When you had Telos, or even while you're at IHRSA, was there a way that you were able to, whether it be formally or informally, identify people's strengths?
Well, yes and no. I wouldn't say I was able to use it at IHRSA because, you know, working with volunteers is a little bit of a different thing. And that is one of the bigger challenges with working with a not-for-profit of any type, where you're dealing primarily with volunteers. I mean, you do have a staff, but you're dealing with volunteers. That's, you know, it's really a different, you know, management challenge than working where you're the person in charge and you've got an employee that you're working with. With the employees at my former club, absolutely, we did personality assessments, we did Strength Finder 4.0, we did all sorts of we used all sorts of tools to sort of determine, you know, what people's strengths were and where their interests were. And then in their reviews, of course, we would even ask them in our 90-day checkup that we did every 90 days. One of the questions we would ask them, do you have some skills and talents that we're maybe not aware of that you'd like to contribute towards something here? Because, you know, you go through the interview process and you'd be surprised what you'd find that comes out of those. You know, there are latent artists that love to do that. There are latent salesmen that aren't in sales jobs. There's, you know, there's all sorts of gifts that people have that they're sort of hiding, or you just don't know that they're there. They're willing to let flourish if you let them. So it's a combination. I think if you have the opportunity to do some personality assessments and performance reviews, you know, check-ins to determine and learn that information, that's great. At IHRSA, I did a breakfast with Brent, which was where I met with every single employee for breakfast virtually for a 30-minute meeting, one-on-one. And one of my questions was, you know, tell me where your passion really lies. What parts of your job do you really enjoy the most? And what skills or talents do you have that I wouldn't know about, and maybe even some of your colleagues don't know about, that you have interest in? I learned a lot.
I was going to say, did you learn much?
I did. Yeah, I did. And it allowed us to use some of those talents in ways that weren't being used at the time, which, of course, with the reduced staff and, you know, less manpower than we've ever had there, that's so much more important. Did
you find when you had those breakfasts with anyone, and you know, I don't want any names, but did you find anyone that was around pegging a square hole and you went, we've actually got you in the wrong role and we can move you into this role, or we could add that to give you more job satisfaction or fulfillment? Yes. Yes. I won't give you a name, but no. You know, one of the other things I think, because I know you're talking about team buy-in, I'm a big fan of identifying a champion for really important initiatives where you've got one person that's sort of leading that charge. And I did that with one individual in particular who is, you know, in management. I'll just say that much, at IHRSA, and had a responsibility over a given department. And I asked her to be the champion of something else. Actually, this happened with two individuals. Put them in charge of an area that they had never been in charge of before. And they're kicking, you know what, they're just doing a fabulous job. That is awesome. That's a great story. Again, it comes back to that communication piece, doesn't it? Sitting down and actually having a conversation with somebody and just talking to them. Yeah, it does. And, you know, there has to be at least a level of trust there too, you know, which you've got to build that first. I know when I first stepped in, no disrespect to my predecessor, but I'm on a, you know, I've got every employee at IHRSA is on my cell phone, even, you know, the entry level people. And I called 5 minutes before we got on here for one specific thing. And I still remember the first time or two I called them at home on their cell phones, they were like petrified. Like, I've never heard from the CEO in person before. How did you get my cell phone number? I was like, oh, this is going to continue. And here's my cell phone number, by the way. But you've got to develop a little bit of that relationship, obviously, to get them where they're comfortable. So I didn't do the breakfast right off the bat because I knew that wouldn't fly. But about 3 or 4 months in, that's when I did it. Love it. Now, for those that don't know Brent Darden, Brent is not big on technology. He's not a huge social media person. And while you were answering that last question, you proved exactly that, because you are officially the only American citizen that still has a landline. I heard the landline phone in the background.
Yeah, I'm sorry. That's my wife's fault because she's a CPA, and believe it or not, some of her clients still want to fax
What?
documents to our home. Yes, she's got it all set up. So we can scan, we can, download, we can do all those things. But there are certain clients that she's had for decades that still want to fax their
Oh my
tax
goodness.
documents.
I love that. That's a great story. Now, this is a tough question, I think, or it might be an easy one. I reckon it's tough because you're a hard marker on yourself. You've been there for 9 months, coming up to 10 months. You were only supposed to be there for 3 or 4, maybe 5, but we won't go into that. Have you achieved what you set out to in this organization?
Oh, definitely yes. And definitely no.
Well, let's cover the yes bit first.
Yeah, let's cover the yes. Maybe first on a positive note. I shared JT in some of the very first presentations I gave when I first started to groups was crisis breeds progress, inventiveness, and bold strategies. And I tried to live by that going forward. So looking back at this juncture where I'm, maybe a month and a half away from relinquishing the reins to the new CEO, I'd say yes, because number one of my first tasks was to make sure that IHRSA survived financially, that it was going to be around. And that was absolutely 100% in question. And we've done that. So that's a yes. Number two was, there was really a lack of trust. Some of it earned the loss of trust, and some of it may be unfair because of the cancellation of the trade show and convention. And we had a lot of debt with suppliers and other things. But I think we've earned back the trust of our constituents, both suppliers and club members, over the last 9 months to a large degree. There's still a few, I'm sure, that are outside that bubble, but by and large, we are on a much better path with that. I think we've overcome most of that to the point where people are really supporting IHRSA in so many different ways. Number three, like everyone, managing the crisis, I think we did well with all the shifting circumstances, remote work and less employees with an industry that was shuttered and closed down and suffering. Then to still move forward with all these initiatives that you've referenced before and have all these wins and all these successes through all of that, with employees not even be allowed to come to the office in Boston, and still are not allowed to. We can't have all the employees in the office at the same time.
Oh, still
only a few of the employees can go at any one time. So it's all been remote. So trying to develop all these relationships when you never get to go to the office is, been another challenge, but that's for another day. And then finally, I mentioned this earlier, but sort of positioning the association for maybe a brighter future, a more successful future. I think the councils alone have helped do that because they're going to be continuing on and they're going to be in place for years to come. And they're very helpful. They're creating a lot of value. They're helping drive and guide the decisions. There won't be complacency with all these councils in place. It's just not going to happen. And the feedback mechanisms are in place. So we're hearing from the people we need to hear from, and they're the right people, and they're going to change, over time, like councils do with new people coming on and people rotating off. So I think all those things are reason to feel good about it. Maybe my answer of no is because there's such a long way to go. IHRSA is not where it needs to be. No question. There's unfinished business there. But to a degree, such is the plight of an interim CEO, right? There's a reason they call it interim. What I can say is I really have tried my best to position it to be successful as if I was going to stay on and be there. I'm not doing things that I wouldn't do if I weren't going to be the CEO moving forward. So that's a long-winded answer. I'm sorry, but that's what I think.
No, it's a great answer. And if you did everything, then whoever comes in has got nothing to do anyway.
There's plenty left to do.
So do you think you'll sit back on your porch, on your cabin, that you will finally get back to building in the next couple of months? Will you sit back and kind of look and go, I'm really pleased with what I achieved with the team?
Yeah, that's going to sound self-serving to JT probably, and I don't know how to go around that, but I'd have to say, yes, I would. If it ended today, I would not regret the effort that I put in or what I've tried to do or the way I've gone about it. There may be a few decisions there that I would do a little bit differently, but overall, I think so. I hope everyone else judges what I've done in that regard. And it isn't just me. Absolutely. It's, the IHRSA board has been extremely supportive, been very involved, let me do the things I needed and wanted to do. And also been there right beside me. The IHRSA staff, many people have said, man, there's more going on at IHRSA now than in the last 5 years. And I would not argue with that, but it's with half the people.
Yeah.
And so the staff that's remains has done an outstanding job. And then the industry leaders like yourself that have been part of these councils that have been made up and headlight teams. I mean, it's just been really such a blessing. Like you, I don't know how many hours a week you've contributed on IHRSA's behalf without any remuneration through the GFJFA and other things, but I know it's been a lot, and there's been a lot of other people doing the same. So it's not all me. The good news is I have a lot of good friends, and people are really passionate about our industry, and they care about it, and they want to help.
Yeah, look, I agree with that. There's an army behind IHRSA to help improve our industry on so many levels. And those councils that you discussed earlier, I think there are about 4 or 5 of them now. They're those councils that are going to have a massive impact on our industry moving forward. And I think that's a great legacy to have left, Brent. Okay. Normally we would have caught up with each other about 8 weeks ago and seen each other in sunny San Diego or debaucherous Las Vegas or Los Angeles at the Staples Center. But that event didn't happen.
Right.
You then picked another date and you moved that date. And because you're the interim CEO, I'm assuming it's only because of you that we're going to Dallas in October.
Absolutely not, of course. Well, we had the convention and trade show, as everyone will probably be aware, in California, in LA specifically. And they still are, under a lot of restrictions. Even today, we could not have, even in October, they already announced that in October, there would still be restrictions on mass gatherings as far as how many people you could have.
Wow.
And that wasn't going to work for us, because they were going to limit the number of people. So, it really was a foregone conclusion once we finally heard that they just were not going to relax restrictions. And there, for those of you that are not in the US, California is absolutely further behind than any other state in the United States, way behind. As far as all the restrictions and mandates and occupancies and closures of businesses, not just gyms, and other restrictions. So it couldn't have been in a worse place than LA. Moving it to Dallas really was a no-brainer. Texas is, on the forefront of recovering from the pandemic. Everything's been open, mandates lifted for well over a month now. Things are progressing very well. Cases are going down. Everything's moving in the right direction. So that's been a great decision. The response has really been overwhelming from all the industry partners and suppliers. I checked just so I'd have a current number for you, and we already have 135 booths rented for the convention and trade show.
Wow.
And we just moved to Dallas. What has it been? Maybe 3 weeks ago, we announced that. So we haven't even made it. Our team has not made it down the list yet, because we kind of go in order from the big boys down to the smaller players that rent the smaller spaces. And yeah, that's been a really good move. That said, I'm sure your next question is going to be, or perhaps would be, well, what are you expecting? How's the convention and trade show going to be? And I'd have to be, of course, transparent and forthcoming and say, it's not going to be like all the biggest ones we've ever had, because there's too many variables out there, right?
Yeah.
That unrelated to IHRSA completely, but it's just like yourself, you're in Australia, they're lifting restrictions, so you can travel, but if you go back, you might have to quarantine for 12 or 14 days.
Yeah.
And there's countries that won't allow people to travel to the US. There's also countries the US won't allow to come in. And so when you talk about international attendees, that's going to be greatly diminished. Here in the US, the clubs have been closed. There's been a lot of cuts. Now the clubs are reopening, they're recovering. Certainly by October, we think we'll be so much further along as far as the recovery of our industry here in the US. But hey, there's, almost 1/4 less clubs in the United States.
Wow.
So just start with that. There's the potential pool has been reduced by 1/4 of attendees. And then of those that are doing well, there's still a financial consideration. And then if they're running much leaner staffs, which many of them are, right? They're running lean. We've heard that over and over. That means, hey, can we really take 3, 4, 5, 6 staff out to the convention and trade show for a week? Do we have enough people to do what needs to be done back here at the club? And so there'll be some adjustments there for sure. But we're going to have a big show. It's our 40th anniversary. People are absolutely pent up demand to get an in-person meeting. The suppliers couldn't be more excited. It really is the first in-person opportunity for the suppliers to have a trade show since the pandemic started in 2019. There's not another one in the whole world where they've had the opportunity to get in front of these attendees. So it's going to be a big deal. It's just not going to be as big a deal as it is year in and year out. It's going to be a little bit smaller number of attendees and a few less suppliers also, but it's nevertheless going to be a big event. We're excited about it.
Did I see that James Clear is coming back to speak at it?
I believe so. I know he was scheduled to speak at last year's. I don't know, JT, if we've confirmed his availability with the move of the dates. So I don't know that for sure.
Well, the keynotes at IHRSA are always the highlights. So that's worth getting along to Dallas just for the keynotes, and also the free beer that there's vendors will be giving out in bars after the trade show closes as well, I'm sure, is another reason to head there.
Well, let me say one other thing about the program, just because you mentioned it. It's not just the keynotes. One of the things we're reimagining, absolutely, is the convention and trade show.
Oh, wow.
You're going to see a new program. You're going to see a bunch of new speakers, especially from outside the industry. We're putting full court press on here in Texas to find business owners and experts and authors, different people that we can bring to the convention and trade show. We're going to have a CEO track. We're going to have a medical track. It's not going to be the show of old. It's going to be a new reimagined show.
Okay, so up until about 30 seconds ago, I was comfortable not coming, but now I'm very uncomfortable about not coming because this sounds intriguing, all the new tracks. And I love the idea of getting speakers from outside the industry to come in and educate us on getting better. If we always look at the industry, we only get as good as the industry. That's a great initiative, Brent.
Yeah, we're excited about it. We really are. And of course, I'm in Texas, for those of you that don't know, in Dallas, not too far from where the show is happening. So, we've really, again, invited a lot of the leaders that own clubs here in Texas, and also suppliers that are headquartered here in Texas now, to help us find these new speakers. And we've got a good list going right now. So yeah, it's going to be, I'm anxious for everybody to see what we do.
Every time I speak with you, I learn something new. Today, I've learned heaps. I've learned about the 3 I's. I've learned about informed, invite, and involve. I've learned how important it is to have that team. Buy-in comes back to having conversations with people after you built the trust, to be then able to find their strengths and really dive deep into getting to know them as people. I've learned yet again how reimagination leads to innovation, and the innovation that IHRSA has done, both now hearing about what they're doing in Dallas, as well as a whole bunch of other things. Most of all, I've learned yet again just how patient you are, because I know you would have loved all this done within about 60 to 90 days. And your patience may have been stretched at different times, but to be able to walk away after 9 or 10 months to achieve, for IHRSA as an organization to achieve as much as you have with as little resources as you have, is quite phenomenal. And your patience has been exceptional.
Thank you, JT. I appreciate that. I'm not sure the IHRSA staff would mark me high on patience, because every conversation ends with, why is this going to take so long?
But that's why you're patient, because it just eventually happens.
Yeah, that's right.
Mate, look, I really appreciate your time. I won't be back, ladies and gentlemen, to do another rewind show, because these are supposed to take 20 minutes and Brent and I have been chewing the thin now for 45. So I'm pretty sure Chantal's going to sack me from this role, and she'll be back next month. I know she's planning to get Amanda Stevens on, who was a previous guest and is a speaker at the Fitness and Recreation Industry Technology Summit here in Australia. Brent, before we close off, let me give you the final word. What final word have you got for the international fitness industry?
Final word for the industry. I couldn't be more optimistic really about the future of our industry after we come out of the pandemic. All the markers that I see from the financial markets, from the countries that are out ahead of us on the curve of recovering from the pandemic, from the clubs here in the US that are in states and areas where the restrictions have been lifted, and what they're seeing as far as revenues and growth, and they're hitting numbers that exceed pre-pandemic numbers already. So I want everybody to know, there's hope out there as you see the light out into the future at the end of the tunnel. I think our industry is going to recover well. That would be one. And then second, to remind everybody, to take care of themselves from a mental health, a mental wellness perspective. The pandemic's taken a colossal toll on people, particularly people, well, in all positions, but people that are leading organizations, meaning the people that are listening to this call, hopefully, JT, they've had a lot of responsibility. They feel responsible for people that work for them, for their business, for their families, for themselves. And I've spoken with so many people over the last several months that have really opened up about the struggles they've had emotionally and mentally with the stress that they've gone through. And so I just want to encourage them to remember, a couple of things. One is take care of yourself. And we know that involves physical activity and sleep and hydration and all things we know. And it also means that it's okay, to get stressed and worn down. And so I just encourage everybody to take care of themselves and take care of their partner across the workplace if they need it. And then the final one is just to remember that we really do need to change the narrative that's out there about our industry. We started the pandemic and quickly learned we didn't have the credibility, the respect, the impact that we wanted as far as being essential businesses. And if we want that to be different in the future, we've got to really change the narrative and use language that's more inclusive, more broad, and not about our business and how many memberships we can sell, but about how many people we can help. That would be the things I would say.
And here endeth the lesson. Amen.
Yes.
Thank you, sir. It's been a pleasure as
Thank you,
always.
JT.
Catch up.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks, mate.
Talk to you soon. Bye. Thanks, everyone.